and we will start it up top right now with Mr. Russell Wilson. And Russell Wilson has been playing like, yeah, absolute dong, and he's going to have a massive negative offensive line advantage in this one because Washington's pass rush, although their secondary, which is actually coming along somewhat these last couple of weeks, although their secondary has not been the best the whole year, their defensive line has still been solid even without Chase Young, ranking top 10 in tackling, top 10 in run D, and yes, top 10 in pass rush will have an advantage today. Since returning from this injury, Russell Wilson is not the same player. He has been seeing 52% completion, absolute dog shit, 184 yards per game, 0 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. It could be a get-right spot versus Washington's number 28 ranked secondary, according to Pro Football Focus. And on a slate where not a ton of guys are projecting out for insane usage or insane fantasy points, Russ does project out as my highest projected player, just barely ahead of the quarterback on the opposite one in this one, and Taylor Heineke. So it keeps Russ in play, but I'm not going to be putting him on here just yet as a yes. Now, if you're playing 150 lineups, there's a really good chance that I'm going to be getting somewhere around 40 to 50+% of Russ. Now, I do think Russ, according to my ownership projections, you can get them down below if you want to, join the lovely community on Patreon. I have Russ coming in at 65% projected ownership. So if I got 50%, I'd be below the field. I expect as of now to be below the field on him. We will see on the live stream later tonight at 6 p.m. East Coast time exactly where I end up. The next player on this list is somebody who continues to get there, and it's not just on efficiency. Like, he's getting there on efficiency to an extent, but he has 7 or more targets in every single game since week 1. So it's also volume, right? The man's 29% target share, ranks top 10 in the NFL right now. He's number 1 in the entire NFL in terms of his percentage of his team's air yards. He's number 1 in deep targets with over 20 deep targets at 20+ yards this year. So there's upside there, right? He has the efficiency, right? He's getting a lot of these efficiency metrics, but he has the upside on the volume, and he's number 2 in the entire NFL in wide receiver snaps. The man is barely coming off the field 95% of the time right now. He's basically a walking 10 points. That's not going to get you there at 10,600, but in close to half of his games, he's gone over 20. And in this matchup against Seattle, I do think it's a favorable spot for Terry McLaurin. At 10,600 right now, like if you're playing in a GPP, early on, I probably would lean to Terry McLaurin over Russell Wilson. Maybe not in small field stuff. Like if you're playing in a small field single entry and 3 max, I probably lean to the quarterback who's a little bit safer, who has some mobility, who gets probably 18 to 20 points more than this wide receiver will, just based on how quarterback scoring goes. But when the wide receiver pops off, he's hitting that 25 to 35 number a lot more probably than Russell Wilson will be. So that's where in the larger field tournaments, I lean, if you're playing one lineup, which I think most people here are, I lean to Terry McLaurin over Russell Wilson. In my projections, I have Russell Wilson for 3 more points, which is why if you're just going pure projection-wise, smaller field stuff, if you play cash games, go Russ. Larger field shooting for the ceiling, I have Terry McLaurin for a higher ceiling right now. The next man up is a wide receiver on the opposite team, which the wide receiver pricing on Seattle is a little bit confusing to me, I guess. Tyler Lockett so far this year in 5 games with Russell Wilson is averaging 6.6 targets per game, right? He's mainly getting there off of big play success. You saw a massive play last week, didn't result in a touchdown, but he had the massive play last week. He had 3 touchdowns in his first 2 games of the year with Russ, and now he has 100 or more air yards in 3 straight games, and he has 100 or more air yards in 4 to 5 games so far with Russell Wilson. So there's a lot of upside there for him on a 25% target share. Well, if you're getting a 25% target share pretty consistently right now from Tyler Lockett, we would expect Russ to throw somewhere around 30 to 35 times. You factor in 1 or 2 throwaways or just bat down to the line of scrimmage, and that's where you're starting to see these 7 target games for Tyler Lockett fall into, and it does look good. But at 10,200, I would prefer McLaurin, who's a little bit more. I think McLaurin obviously has a higher target share, competing with guys like Dax Millen and DeAndre Carter, and maybe he gets back Curtis Samuel this week, who's been only limited in 1 full game this year. So I'll take on Terry McLaurin's usage and upside over Tyler Lockett's for a similar price right now, which is going to make Tyler Lockett a maybe, because if I like Terry McLaurin more and I like the guy below Tyler Lockett more in Taylor Heineke here, it's tough to get to Lockett, and I like the guy below that a little bit more, right? So Taylor Heineke looks like potentially the best play on the slate right now. He's going to have the number 1 pass protection grade this week, according to Pro Football Focus, against Seattle's bottom 5 pass rush in the NFL. You've had Mr. Taylor Heineke here finishing as a quarterback 1 in 3 out of his last 4 games. I mean, Terry McLaurin has been benefiting actually from Taylor Heineke lately. Heineke has been playing a lot better. These last 2 games, Heineke's had a lot of success here as I look over on my sheet. He's had strong finishes in terms of an 81% and a 73% completion percentage, 8.7 yards per attempt over his last 2 games, and 4 total touchdown passes with a little bit of rushing upside as well in there. A 29-yard rushing game. He had a 90+ yard rushing game like a month ago. So Taylor Heineke right now on a showdown slate in a good matchup looks really good, and most of the time quarterbacks are at least $10,000, right? You're getting like an $11,000 quarterback like Russ, a $10,400 one. He's $9,800. He's very easy to get to on this slate. So Heineke for me is looking very strong. Heineke for me is a yes. And people will ask me, so if I play McLaurin, I have to play Heineke. I mean, it will work out. You can afford it on the slate. You don't have to though, right? You don't have to. The night that I won earlier, a month and a half, 2 months ago, the $30,000, I had Devontae Adams in the captain spot without Aaron Rodgers. Part of that had to do with the pricing of Aaron Rodgers on this slate, and it is definitely easier to get to McLaurin on this slate. So yeah, I do think you definitely can play it, but you don't have to. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself into lineups as long as the lineups still make sense to you. So now we'll talk about this final guy who I would consider the closeout of like the 5 studs on this slate, and it's DK Metcalf. And this is another reason why it's a little bit difficult for your boy over here, your boy with the Miami Vice shirt on. We're feeling good. We're feeling like ourselves right now. Might be trying to book a trip to Florida later today. Who knows? We'll see. Have a good time, right? And live your life. Just live your life, like Rihanna and T.I. said. Shout out the GOATs. But it's tough to get to Tyler Lockett, or at least a little bit more difficult to get to Tyler Lockett, and this is the dilemma between it, because he's so much more expensive than DK Metcalf when Metcalf is the wide receiver 1 of the team. When Metcalf is averaging more volume with Russ in 5 games, 8.2 targets per game compared to the 6.6 targets per game that you're getting for Tyler Lockett. When Metcalf himself has a massive and likely a very, very just massive unit on the dude, right? I mean, look at this guy. He's the number 1 right there with A.J. Brown. Size, speed, specimen player in the NFL. I get it. Lockett's got these deep bombs on him, and it's kind of hit or miss. Metcalf is going to be a lot more consistent. Now, in his last 2 games, yeah, it's been bad because Russ has been dog shit. He's been averaging a 52% completion percentage. He's been dog shit. But you've seen 18 targets over the last 2 games for him, 7 catches, 57 yards. And this is a very strong matchup in the Washington secondary where nobody is going to have an advantage against him with a solid team total. DK Metcalf for me, I lean DK Metcalf over Mr. Tyler Lockett. Now, you might be wondering, where are the ownership numbers coming in right now on Lockett versus Metcalf, and also maybe on McLaurin? Well, sign up for Patreon, you can see, but I'm happy to share where the current ones are at right now. Lockett I have coming in at 48% ownership, and Metcalf 52%. So if you told me Metcalf was going to be like 58% owned, and Lockett was going to be like 40% or 38% owned, and there's actually a 20% ownership difference, yeah, I can get there a little bit more. But right now, it's not looking like that. It's not looking like that at all. And I don't think I'm shocking anybody here when I go back into this and I say that those guys up top, those 5 guys up top, are likely your best captain options on the slate. Like, we'll get down through the slate more, and you have guys who are limited, guys who are splitting their roles like 3 different ways, guys coming back from an injury and in murky status on what they will do, but also how that's going to affect the other players on their respective teams. So these 5 guys that we're talking about right here are probably your 5 best captain options in my opinion. And I really, really like the price discount you're getting on Terry McLaurin or on Taylor Heineke. McLaurin to an extent, but Taylor Heineke and DK Metcalf. So if you're looking at where to start captain lineups today, I'm probably starting along the lines of a DK Metcalf, Taylor Heineke, and seeing where I can build my lineup out there. They're both below $10,000. They are 2 of my 3 highest projected players on the slate. It makes a lot of sense. After that, I probably start to go all the way up top and hope that you get a Russell Wilson start to be himself again, and those other 2 wide receivers would fall in line after that. So in terms of captains that stand out today, and the full breakdown we just discussed and talked about, the full breakdown, I'm probably leaning a McLaurin and a Metcalf, trying to play around with your lineups there, build out different styles of lineups with those 2 fellas. That's where I'm leaning on the captains, followed by Russ, Lockett, McLaurin, in probably that order. We'll know on the live stream, though, later tonight, 6 p.m. on the main channel, the Sal Vetri channel right here. If you're watching this on the Clips channel, Sal Vetri main channel if you want to tune in for that one.